Okay, Torah Anytime, what we do for you, for all our unbelievable viewers on TorahAnytime.com. Welcome everyone. Quick chazara. As we start again from the top of Samach Tesam and Aleph and wish everybody on Torah Anytime a good Chodesh. The Mishnah says that when you sell a field, you sell the stones that are needed for the field. What does it mean, stones that were needed for the field? Over here it was explained, avnei da achpa, stones that are put on the grain to weigh them down, that they shouldn't be blown away. Ula amar avonim asduris legeder, stones that are already arranged to be used as a stone wall. Even if they're just piled up, they're not arranged. So the Gemara says, Tani Siduris, amend that to be arranged. Now, if you remember, we said, before I turned on the camera, that Rameir holds more things are included in a sale. He's more inclusive than the Rabbanan. So therefore, over here, when they explain that avonim that are needed in the field is avnei da achpa, are stones that are used to weigh down the grain. The Rameir, it's included in the sale. The misaknon, if the stones were fashioned, smoothed out for the holding down the grain, afal gav d'loy mochzan, even if they weren't actually put on the grain. L'Rabbanan, according to Rabbanan, who the mochzan, it's only if they were actually put on the grain that they're sold together with the field. Ula, that says that the avonim that are needed is talking about for a stone wall, Ula, the Amar Avonim Hasdurais Legeder, that are arranged for the wall, the Rameya, they're included, the Masakman, even if they were just fashioned to be used for a wall, Afal Gavdolei Sidron, even if they're not arranged. While the Rabbanan, they're only sold with the field, who the Sidron. Now, the Mishnah continues, Ve'esakonim shebekerem, the reeds of a vineyard, Shehein Litzorchai, that are needed for the vineyard. So the Gemara says, Koni Maya Viditayu, what are the function of these reeds? As we welcome in Mel Zachter, Imrei Debei Rabbi Yanai, they said in the Academy of Rabbi Yanai, Konim Hamuchulokin, these are reeds that are smoothed out, Shemamidin Tachas Agafonim, that we prop up the vines. Remember, the vines don't trail on the ground, they're lifted above the ground, and they are propped up by these vines. Now, again, the Rameir, who's more inclusive, the reeds are included, the Mishafyan, if they were planed, Afal Gavdolei Mukman, even though they're not actually propping up the vines yet. The Rabbanan, they're only sold, who the Mukman, if they're actually propping up the vines. Vesatfua Muchaberes Lekarka, grain that's attached to the ground. Now this is even, says the Gemara, even though they're ready to be harvested, and you might think that we should say, whatever is ready to be harvested is as if it's harvested, and then it wouldn't be considered mechubel karka. Even so, if it's still attached to the ground, it's sold with the field. When Mark sells to Chaim a field, he includes in it a thicket of reeds, shepchusa mebeis raiva, that's less than a quarter of a kav, because a thicket of reeds that's less than a quarter of a kav doesn't have its own identity. He says, even though they're thick reeds that have a chashivas, but if they're less than a quarter of a kav, they're sold together with the field. There's a shemira and a hut, she'ena asiya betit, that's not cemented down with plaster. And now they're sold with the field, even though the hut is not attached to the ground, so I might think it's not sold, but it is. There's a charib she'enoi murkav, a carob tree that's not yet mature enough to be grafted. There's besulas hashikmar, and a sycamore tree that is not yet pruned, because if it's a virgin sycamore tree, it's not that choshev, and therefore it's sold together with the field, and that's true afal gav da alime, even though these trees are particularly thick. Even so, if the carob is not ready to be grafted, and the sycamore tree is still a virgin sycamore tree, it's sold together with the field. But he doesn't sell the stones that are not needed in the field. So the Rameya, this means the loy misaknon. Rameya, it means that it wasn't yet fashioned, it wasn't smoothed out to hold down the grain. L'Rabbanan, it means the loy machzan, that it wasn't placed on the grain. Ulalula da'amar avanim sedurais legeder, it means stones that are ready for a stone wall. L'Rameya the loy misaknon, it wasn't fashioned yet for the wall. L'Rabbanan the loy sidron, it wasn't arranged to be used as a wall, it's not sold together with the field. And not the reeds in the vineyard that are not for its need. So the Rameya, who's more inclusive, this means the loy mishafyan. The reeds weren't even planed to be used as a prop. L'Rabbanan, it means the loy mukman, that they weren't put yet under the vines. Mark doesn't sell to Chaim grain that was uprooted from the ground. And this is even if the grain still needs the ground. The grain has to be left to ear out on the ground, but if it's detached from the ground, he doesn't sell it together with the field. Not a thicket of reeds, which is a quarter of a kav, even though they're weak reeds, even though they're thin and weak reeds. Not only does Mark reserve for himself the thicket of reeds, which is a quarter of a kav, even if he has a furrow of a type of perfume, a type of herb which is fragrant, it has its own identity. The furrow of balsam, that has its own identity, then einanim keresima. He doesn't sell it together with the rest of the field. Amra Papa, but who dekari la varda de planya. That's only if it has its own identity, like people say, oh, that's Mark's rose bushes, so then that's not sold together with the field. You know, Mark is a romantic. And not a hut that is cemented with plaster. Even though it's attached to the land, and therefore we might think he sells it with the land, but it has its own identity, and it's not sold with the land. And not a carob tree that's ready for grafting, nor a prune sycamore tree, and that's true, even though they are thin ones, even so, they have their own identity, and they're not sold with the field. Now the Gemara inquires a few questions. Boy Rebbe Lazar, malabnois shel psachim, the door stops. Mao, is it sold together with the doors? The door stops. So, if they're attached with plaster, loy tibaylach, da mechaber. Ki tibaylach de nekite besiche, they're only attached with pegs. So that's pretty temporary, mine. So the Gemara says, take it, tishbi ataretz kushis b'yibais. Next shayla. By Rabbi Zeram, if you're selling the house, malabnoi shel chaloinos, the framing around the windows, mao. Mi amrina l'noi ba'al mahu davide, it's merely decorative and it's not sold together. Oidil mekaven the mechabre, since it's attached, it's sold together with the house. Take it, tishbi ataretz kushis b'yibais. By Rabbi Yemi, the third shayla. If you sell a bed, now under the bed were coasters, so that remember the bed lied, they didn't have fancy tiles. It lied, the legs were on the damp floor. So they had blocks or coasters under the bed. So does Mark sell these blocks or these coasters together with the bed? The blocks under the legs of the bed, mao. So again, the Gemara says, where the blocks are attached to the legs with pegs, then like tibaylach, it's taken along with it, and therefore it's part of the bed. where it doesn't go with it, it's not attached. Is it still part of the bed or not? So take your tishbit yitaritz kushis ribayis. Not a grafted carob tree, not nor a prune sycamore tree. So now the Gemara asks an interesting question. How do we know that if it's a choshev tree that has its own identity, Mark does not sell it together with the field? Minani mili. And now the Gemara brings us an interesting proof, a really interesting proof. It brings a proof from the Maris HaMachpelah. You have to know that in the pasuk of the Maris HaMachpelah, it says that Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav, the Amar Krava Yokem Steya Ephraim Asher b'Machpelah, and the field of Ephraim, which is where the double cave of the burial crypt was found, went into the ownership of Avram, and the pasuk continues and says that with all the trees in the field, that was in the boundaries Saviv, which is in the Gevul, its boundaries roundabout. So what is sold automatically with a field? Mishet tzarech legevul Saviv, that we know that it's marks because it's within his boundary. Now that excludes a particularly expensive tree like a sadan ashikma, a prune sycamore, or a grafted carob tree, because that people know it's marked not because it's within his boundary, but because it has its own chashivas. People know, oh, that's Mark's carob tree. Yatsu elu she'ain tzrichen legvul saviv, and therefore that's not sold automatically together with the field. Amr Misharshia, we also see, because it says gvul saviv. Now the word saviv is superfluous. It could just say what was in the boundary. Why does it have to say saviv? From there we learn that when you sell a field, the one who buys it acquires the elevated boundary around the field. Amar Rav Misharshia, Mikan lemitzarim in Atayra, that when you sell a field, the buyer acquires the elevated boundaries as well. I should slow down over here, because otherwise your wives will want to know why you get home so early. That's no good. That's not a good thing. Time for a drink. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, she'akol niyeh b'dvaro. Again, we should train ourselves. It's not so hard to train ourselves to have in mind that we're learning Torah Lishma, to be mekayim the mitzvah b'dibarta bam, la'aseh nachas ruach liyitzreinu, as we mamish are in the month of Elul now. Wow, we're in this month. What a month! What a month! The last month of the year. Everything goes according to the finale. Well, how important it is, and since Talmud Torah is keneged kulam, Talmud Torah equals everything else, there is nothing better we could be doing than this. So says the Gemara, Amar Rav Yehuda, Hayman de mazvin ara lechavrei, where Mark sells land to Berish, Tzarech lemichtav, he has to itemize in the deed of sale, Kani lach, in the deed of sale, it should say Berish, Kani lach, it should be acquired for you, Diklin, palm trees, Bitolin, and saplings, the roots and the tzitzin. Yeah. 1 second, Rabbi. V'hutzin v'tzitzin. Hutzin and tzitzin are other species of palm trees. Now, remember we said that if it's not a very expensive tree, all the trees are sold with the field. And therefore the Gemara says, even though he doesn't write this, Kani, Berish will still acquire it. That's more of a refined document. And Berish should insist, because, is this a yesod in doing business with people? The more you could clarify things, the better off you are. Now, Amalei Ara Vidikle. If Mark tells Berish, I'm selling you land and dikle. Dikle is rabim. So that means miat rabim shnaim, the smallest plural is 2. So that means land and 2 date palms. So chazinan, we see, I islay dikle, if the land has date palms, Yov leitre dikle. So then Mark is responsible to give to Berish 2 date palms. V'i lesley, if he doesn't have 2 date palms, since he made up in the deal Ara v'dikle, Zoven leitre dikle. He has to buy for Berish 2 date palms. V'i meshabde, if Mark has date palms, but Mel has a lien on those date palms, so then Porek leitre dikle. Then he has to remove the lien so that he could give it to Berish clean. Arabidically, if he says land with date palms, chazinon, ispadikle yavle. If he has land with date palms, then he gives it to Berish. V'ilav, but if he doesn't have any land with date palms, and he told him, I'm giving you land with date palms, then that's a mekach tois. Then that's a mekach tois. He fooled Berish, he misled Berish, and Berish could demand his money back. Arabedically, land that's fit for date palms, no, that just means that it's fertile land that could grow date palms. Then less like dicklay, then Berish has no claim for date palms, because all he meant is the chazia l'diklei kamerle. All he meant is that's what's fit for date palms. Amalei, let's say now, Mark says as follows. Levar medikla plan. Berish, I'm selling you this field, except for this palm tree. Chazina. Idikla tavahu, if it's a superior palm tree, shiurei shayre, that he was reserving that palm tree, but he sells all the other palm trees to Berish. However, idikla bishahu, if it's a inferior palm tree, and he said besides this inferior palm tree, he meant even this inferior palm tree I'm keeping for myself, and for sure all the rest. And kol shechein hanach. Now, you see how the Gemara has everything figured out here exactly. And I see it's good to see Shimon Deer here. Great to have you, together with his delicious child. And we welcome in Yisrael Meir Kaplan, who just joined us. And I have to tell you, it's nice to have 30 Zoomers here, besides Sandy and David Helfgott, so that's 32, on a Chodesh Elul night. That's really, really exciting. And again, a good Chodesh to everyone. Now, Amalei levar mi ilne. Mark tells Berish, I'm selling it to you besides the trees. So I is like ilne, if it has trees, then it means levar mi ilne. I is like dikle, if it only has palm trees, then when he said besides the trees, he meant the palm trees. It means levar mi dikle, it means besides the palm trees. I is like gufne, if it only has vines, then he meant levar mi gufne. In other words, even though trees, and here we have Mo Kushner for our 31st Zoomer of the evening, Welcome, Mo, and a good Chodesh to you. It should be a Gesundte year. We are very honored to have our 97-year-old friend join us. This should be a healthy year for you, Mo, with great clarity of thought and mobility. So the Gemara says, the word ilne, of course, more literally means trees. More loosely, it could refer to palm trees. Even more loosely, it could refer to, or not even more, but it also could refer to vines. Ilne v'gufne. If Mark sold a tree, Mark sold a field to Berish, and he said, besides the trees, if it has trees and vines, he only meant to reserve the trees. Varmi ilne. Ilne v'dikne, if it had trees and palm trees. Levarmi ilne. Again, he only meant to keep the trees for himself. What if he said besides the trees, and it had gufne v'dikle, vines and palm trees? So the Rashbam tells us that the word ilne refers more to vines than to palm trees. So then, levar megufne, when he said except for the trees, he meant except for the vines. Okay, Rabbi Isai, another daf in the books. We want to remind you that, again, tomorrow night, Shir will be at 8:15, and we are now going to do the Mishnah Yomis. Tomorrow night I will probably have to daven Mincha and Ma'ariv in Nicholsburg, in Woodburn, so either that or in Woodridge. So we'll be starting not earlier than 8:15.